Kind of has, I think I was going for that Bon Iver and James Blake track, I Need a Forest Fire, or Forest Fire I think it's called, from that same album. Really stripped back, really simple. I'm thinking about how vocalists might want to have a lot of space to sing over the top of this. But let's go through it. So they're grouped together, but nothing on that group. Drum rack has nothing on it, nor does the kick. They're just really dry. So let's just hear those two together and go through some of the sounds. So kind of odd samples. This kind of bubble one here, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting texture-wise. And I think that's a layer I made of, I think the hiss is, I had a hob on that was really hot on my cooker, and I was just throwing water on it, and it kind of hisses when it hits it. And then the bubbles, I'm not sure how I did that. I think it might be the same sound pitched around. But anyway, it's pretty good. Ticks, burp, and a case sound. So unusual, kind of specific sounds, but I had a specific sound in mind. And then the kick is just really dry, kind of like an 808. Lots of attack, lots of click. And then the wavetable, which is really interesting. I really like this progression down. Yeah, I really like it. It looks like it's in B minor or D major, and it has this pedal tone all the way through, B and D. So B minor or D major, it's the root note either way. And it's very loose. I definitely would have played this in live. And it just looks like it descends pretty much down the scale, similar to the original track. So this time it's a sort of a half, I don't know what you would call that, somewhere between a sine wave and a saw wave. So a bit of character, and then it has a sub underneath, 1 octave lower, and a good amount of attack into the sustain to give it, a pronounced start to every note. And then that's running through Wooden Room, Ableton, stock Ableton reverb preset that's again fully wet. And it looks like I've just rolled off all the low and a lot of the very, very highs. I imagine there were a few that were quite painful. So really simple. Again, not a lot going on. And then at the end, rough monosynth, which is a sort of preset we've used a few times in these videos, which we'll provide another link to. I've done the thing that you're never supposed to do, supposedly, which is put reverb on bass. But that explains why the kick and the percussion were so dry, because otherwise everything would start to get washed out. So it's on about 40%. It's the same reverb as on the wavetable, because I want them to be in the same space. And it sounds like this on its own. Okay, let's talk about this note. So we're in B minor, pretty comfortably in B minor here, which has an F sharp and an E in it, but no F. But the bass is playing an F. So let's just play those two together. And I've done it on purpose. It's not a mistake. I wanted to add some oddness into the way it descends. Kind of, I don't think it's unpleasant, but it's definitely weird. And that's something I find happening quite a lot within James Blake's music. Really interesting, unusual notes. I guess you'd call this a passing note, but it's not in this key, but it's just connecting this G and it ends on the root on a D. Well, it starts on B minor, which is the root of the minor, and ends on D, which is the root of the major version of the same scale. And so it definitely brings you back home at the end, but you go sort of off in a weird tangent here with the F. Okay, Here's the next one. Cool. So this is very reminiscent of the first James Blake album, and I think there's only 3 elements because there are 3 members of the live band, so I was trying to get that live feel. The drums are really simple, just a really dry kick, shaker, and a chopping block sound, which is the room sound is being really exaggerated by this, again, verb sweep. Just a default preset with just under 2 seconds of decay. And I think it really helps add a bit of depth to that drum loop, especially because the kick and the shaker are so dry. And if we look at the MIDI, they're pretty much spot on the grid, apart from some of these sort of, passing hits that fall onto the start of the next bar. So if we have a little listen. Yeah, so you can really hear it here. It's a bit late when maybe it should be here or here, I guess. And it's, sorry, here. And then the shaker here is a little late. So subtle variations, they help keep it feeling live. I often find with making drum loops that aren't styled to be really out of grid, like in a lot of hip hop or lo-fi hip hop and things where you really want very off the grid beats. If you're trying to make a beat sound live, I find one of the best ways to do it is to, obviously play it in on pads if you can, or keys, but try really hard to play in time. Or if you're programming it onto a grid like this, sometimes what I'll do is I'll press Command 4 and I'll turn the grid off, and then I'll try as hard as I can. I'll turn these off so it's hard to click on the grid. So I'm like, okay, I want it there. It's not going to latch to anything, so I'll just double click to create the MIDI note. And you'll find if you're not zoomed in too far, you trying to get it on the grid will end up meaning you miss. But you'll miss in a way that isn't like here as well. You'll miss in a way that feels very organic and real. Not like if the grid is on. So if I press Command 4 again to turn the grid back on, and then I click and try and drag it off either side, you'll get, I suppose, the same effect, but I guess it can sound more artificial. And also, you're prone, if you do that over and over again, to start to repeat yourself, even though you're trying to make it sound like it isn't a repeating loop. It's weird. It's hard to explain. I don't know if I'm making much sense, but let's move on to the synth. The Jupiter 8, again by Altoria. It's a slight variation of the FAC 23 preset. I won't go through the whole thing because you can see there's a lot going on, but you can pause here, have a look through each setting if you want to copy it, if you have this as well. As you can hear halfway through, it kind of gets louder and brighter, which is another kind of very James Blakey trick. I did that using an EQ8 with the frequency automated, so it opens up in the second half here. I think the only reason I did it separately to doing it within the synth is because this can all get quite a lot. So quicker and easier visually to just load up an EQ and program in some filtering. And then AutoPan, acting as a tremolo. This is something I do quite a lot. There are some great tremolo plugins out there. Tremolator by Soundtoys is the one I probably use the most. But you can do it with an AutoPan as well. So if I load up a fresh AutoPan, I'll turn the amount up to sort of match this one here. And this is the amount that it's panning left to right. I'll switch it from hertz to sync, so it's now synced up with the clock. I think it's set to 1/8 notes, like that. And then if you pull the phase down to 0, instead of this representing the sound moving left to right, it's just representing the volume up and down. So let me turn this off and I'll play that to show you what I mean. adjust the shape. Yeah, just a very low CPU usage way of getting some movement, some tremolo-esque movement into anything. And then the sub is just, again, this rough monosynth preset, which we've used loads of times. And that is played live in. You can see some things are not quite on the grid again. And yeah, that's pretty much everything for that one. Let's hear the bass and the synth together actually and see melodically what's happening. So kind of weird, the bass isn't providing all that much sort of grounding melodically. It's not pulling us in a really obvious way back to the root note or anything. It's kind of scattered all over 2 octaves. Instead of just following these root notes here, like we might do to quickly put together a bass line, I've just dropped notes around that that kind of emphasize the rhythm. And the chords themselves here, I've just built those by hand, I think. Yeah, really unusual, very jazzy, but this pedal A note here all the way through helps keep everything in check. And I think you can get as weird as you want. It's usually this final chord before you start the loop over again that's really important. It really handles how you come back to the start of the loop. It really gives it a lot of its mood will depend on this final chord. But yeah, just playing around again. Feel free to pause here and have a look through that MIDI if you want to copy it. And I think that's it for this one.